noticed at the beginning of this mini summit, Chen mentioned, I'm now leading the SBOM study group, but as well as onsen study group. So I have to ask Chen to add a survey to the Open Conference Summit. How many people join the onsen study group? Because I will plan to go somewhere nice onsen in this December. So please let me know. Okay. Okay. And let's get started. And so today I will explain about the SBOM document quality guide. The document is somewhat has some meaning, so I will explain later. And in today's grand landscape, there are so many regulations and guidelines and standards with only slight differences in their requirement. And however, much of the detailed content in SBOM documents is left to the discretion of SBOM document creators. And this leads to compatibility challenges in practical applications, particularly within global supply chain. Therefore, determining which information is most critical and ensuring that this vital data is accurately recorded in the SBOM document and effectively communicated to its recipient. Our goal is to create a document that serves as a guide in assessing in the global quality of an SBOM document. In this slide, I'd like to first introduce the setting where we discuss the guide. And we hold monthly meetings, and our meeting schedule are coordinated using our mail list and LFX tools. So you can find the OpenChain website, so you can join our meetings, and you can find some documents. And also, our plan is to eventually release the guide in Markdown format on GitHub. There are still many issues to work through, such as transitioning. Chen mentioned we are now transitioning from a study group to working group, and deciding on the repository structure for sample files included. Also, discussions are being held in Japanese within the OpenChain Japanese community in parallel. So considering the effort required for translations, the PR-driven workflow on GitHub is not suited for our discussions. So while we've created a draft version of the guide on Google Docs, and nothing has been finalized yet. So for anyone joining us now, we greatly appreciate your presence. So please take a look at the meeting minutes stored on GitHub to catch up with our discussions so far. And let me walk you through some of the key details in this guide. The first chapter, we cover the scope as well as what we mean by SBOM document quality. And you might have noticed that the term SBOM is sometimes used in different contexts. From the security perspective, OpenSSF SASA uses SBOM, but they explain supply chain is a development process. But we are focusing the document exchanging between the companies. So to avoid any confusion, we define SBOM documents. So as I said, the set of files, whether written in XML, JSON, YAML, or another format, that conveys software composition information between different parties. In contrast, when we talk about an SBOM on its own, we are sometimes referring to the actual software composition data generated during development within a company. So our focus with SBOM document quality is on ensuring that these exchanged files contain all the essential information. And this allows the receiving party to accurately assess the software composition coming from upstream, particularly from the perspective of license compliance and security assurance defined in OpenChain specification, ISO IC 5230 and 18974. So we also recognize and trying to capture every single details about software composition can be both time-consuming and costly. So that's why we emphasize creating a practical SBOM document, one that's through enough to be useful without being prohibitively expensive or complex to produce. So next, let's talk about the SBOM elements we included in the SBOM document. Basically, we are borrowing most of the specifications from the telco guide. However, instead of simply designing, designating fields as mandatory, because the SBOM format says it's required, or some regulations it's required, we explain each requirement by discussing why it's needed. For example, when it comes to package information, fields like package name and package version are basically often marked as mandatory. But from a security and license compliance perspective, these details are required mainly to ensure that we can uniquely identify the software package being distributed. So in this chapter, we emphasize that including this information is key to enhancing the overall quality of the SBOM. It's all about making sure the document does its job in confirming the integrity and the traceability of the software. So let's move on to chapter 5. In this chapter, we've gathered a set of best practices addressing common challenges that arise when creating and distributing and receiving an SBOM document. We discuss the issues and explore solutions or ways to at least mitigate potential risks. I'll highlight a few pickups from this chapter. And I'd encourage anyone with questions or comments to join the discussion, because these are still very much a work in progress. So firstly, let's take a closer look at section 5.1. As many of you have probably experienced, this section deals with values assigned to each element within SBOM document. For example, while many standards and guides, as I said, insist the package name is mandatory. But the actual value often depends on the specific entity or tool that generates the SBOM document. This means that even for the same package, you might see different names appearing, which creates challenges when trying to accurately identify the distributed software actual package. To help address this issue, several guides, and indeed Chapter 3 of this guide, recommend provide as much combined information as possible to reliably identify a software package. But however, this arises another challenges. As highlighted in yellow in this slide, when SBOM documents move between different parties, it becomes unclear which element each party uses to pinpoint a package. Without this clarity, merging SBOM documents can lead to confusion. To resolve these kinds of problems, it's crucial that entire supply chain agrees on a unified set of elements and a standardized method for recording their values. This consistency will be the key to streamlining how we manage and merge SBOM documents. And let's move on to chapter 5.7 and 5.8, which are closely related. In real-world operations, there's a recurring challenge. Just how much component of information should an entity providing a SBOM document actually include? Also, the BSI guide from Germany lays out the detailed considerations and the level of details of SBOM. When it comes to actually supplying that information, we face not only cost challenges, but also the issue of simply not having access of these details. For example, if we are developing SDK or PSP from a third party, it's often impossible to know which OSS or proprietary software they rely on, unless they provide a detailed SBOM document. On top of that, even when you do receive an SBOM from a third party, the exact level of detail included is still somewhat ambiguous. This is particularly problematic when the third party is focused solely on domestic development, and it's affected by regulation. The party isn't affected by regulations like the CRA. CRAs for Japanese company, big Japanese company are, of course, care about the CRA, but many small companies don't affected directly by the CRA. So we need to convince them to provide a SBOM, detailed SBOM document. Okay. And requesting an SBOM document in such cases can significantly impact contractual terms. And even when a request for an SBOM document is made, there isn't a clear and universally accepted instruction on just how deep the information should go. To address these challenges, it's vital that we determine which entity should have access to what level of detailed information and agree across the entire supply chain on who is responsible for which part. Only by reaching this clarity can we ensure a smooth process when it comes to sharing and merging SBOM documents. And let me introduce chapter 5.8, which is closely related, chapter 5.7. We have a fantastic diagram provided by Owada-san. Luckily, he is here today, there. So if you have any details, you want to have more detailed discussion, please contact him. And many guides and specifications recommend including information about transitive dependencies in the SBOM document and build of SBOM types. However, as I mentioned earlier, in practice, SBOM documents are provided independently by various entities. One particularly tough challenge is highlighted in red in the diagram in figuring out how to properly document relationships for dynamic dependencies within the SBOM document. For example, set vendor. For example, if we provide Android application and we know definitely its application depending on the Android system library, but application we are providing, but the system library will be provided from the Google and updated automatically. So the set vendor don't know what versions are actually installed to the customer's environment. And at this moment, there are no answer to how to write, how to describe in the SBOM document. This is a matter. And at this moment, we don't have the answer, now discussing. So as a result, SBOM document, how to clearly document it in this such relationships in the SBOM document. And this discussion remains unresolved, and the documentation is still in work in progress. The debate is ongoing regarding what kind of SBOM document each entity should create and whether it's even feasible to do so. Additionally, as illustrated in the diagram on the right, we continue to discuss which specific values should be used for the one defined in, for example, SPDX relationship. The table summarizes the meaning behind each option, serving as a basis for further discussion. Although it's not part of this guide, I'd like to explain the appendix. This comparison table is originally created by Ninjori-san. Unfortunately, he can't join today, but I pasted his photo on the right. And actually, Ninjori-san and I make a presentation last Open Source Summit Europe and last Open Source Summit Japan. So please take a look if you are interested. And this table summarizes and compares with SBOM elements correspond to each specification or guidelines, including both SPDX and CycloneDX. Of course, SPDX version 2 and version 3. And CycloneDX, as far as I remember, 1.6 is the latest version. And we plan to further refine this comparison table discussion and eventually include it as an appendix in this guide. Additionally, drawing from the discussions and issues in the past SBOM study group meetings, we are considering including sample SBOM documents that correspond to each rule as an appendix in this guide. Furthermore, since there is also an ongoing initiative called SBOM Sepia under the OpenChain project, we are exploring the possibility of providing sample JSON schemas as part of that effort. And many of you may already be aware, but just before Open Source Summit Europe, CISA announced the update of the minimum elements for SBOM. As you can see from the table of contents on the right, there are many changes compared to the previous version, and public comments are now being accepted, and the deadline is October 3rd. Now, let's take a moment to compare this with the challenges we've discussed earlier. So take a closer look at the name, version, and the unique ideas specified in the data field. There are two interesting points here. The first is that multiple names should be allowed in the name field. Since even the same packages can be known by different names, depending on the distributor, there are many Linux distributors, so it makes sense to support multiple names. However, this introduces new challenges. Both the SPDX and the CycloneDX specifications currently allow only for one package name in their specifications. So at present, now the major formats accommodate multiple names. And of course, I don't know, there may be alternative solutions. And additionally, when version is unknown, it's suggested that a date be provided. While this isn't a problem in major SBOM format, because the version can be any string, but it might make it harder for the recipient to accurately identify the component. Again, I'd like to repeat, name or version itself is not so important, but for specifying the exact component, providing enough information should be included in the SBOM document. It is the most important thing, I think. And overall, this CISA's update is a fantastic revision that has clarified many aspects, yet there still seem to be some unresolved challenges. So if necessary, I plan to submit public comment from this community by the deadline. And one more thing, just before yesterday, the CMU Software Engineering Institute posted an article on improving SBOM quality on their blog. In it, they point out that the most crucial minimum elements are the version string and identifying who is providing it. In my view, this further underscores the importance of knowing exact component and who supplies each component. And today I didn't explain it. There is a chapter about discussing about the supplier name and the supplier's information. And also emphasize the need of standardized values, nothing there that inconsistent value entries are detracting from the overall quality of SBOM documents. Additionally, the article outlines 7 other recommendations, so please take a moment to review them. We, OpenChain SBOM study group and Tobia SBOM study working group are committed to continually improving our documentation by drawing on such various guidelines and resources. As I mentioned at the beginning of this talk, OpenChain built an SBOM study group and working group and holds a regular meeting on 4th Wednesday on every month. We'll collaborate some other communities and discuss what we can do with SBOM matters. We hope you will join our communities as well. Thank you.
So, does anyone have any questions? We have plenty of time. Right, 2 questions. First, I'm going to get Marcel, and then I'll come to you.
Yeah, it's rather a question to maybe Shane or Armine or one of the giants there in the background, because because we have this chapter with this interaction, right? And the IFOS LR, we had a document that I still reference that was no updated since 2 decades now, felt like. Now we're trying to do this again, more or less, it feels. Do you see a chance that this time we will get some more progress, or do you think we might run in the same limits than why ever this was not updated?
Yes, I do think we'll see more progress, because this time it's not about us thinking about what's good. This time it's about law and regulation. So this time we have billions of euro depending on the fact that we can meet the requirements of the market. And I think that's the real change. Because in the past, we were talking about how to do it properly and reduce legal risk. But now we're talking about the fundamental challenge of SBOM management when you need it now to have any entry in certain markets. And I think that's why. But this is not a new thing. It's an evolution, I think. So I would actually say the old IFOS LR thing, which is almost 20 years, is a foundation that we built on. It's how we got to things like telco and how we got here. So
maybe potentially actively reach out to them and invite them and say, let's have a review.
IFOS LR? Yes. Founder. I'll check my files. No, but it's a very good point, Marcel. What I'll do is I'll bring the documentation that Marcel mentioned to you, Kubota-san. Okay. It's an old legal article.
Okay.
Yeah, it's from way back. So I'll bring this into the next discussion.
Sure.
You're welcome. You next.
Thank you for the presentation. I have 2 questions, but my questions are very simple. So first one is, are you developing to check SBOM documentation quality? And second question is, will this document be fit for AI SBOM as well?
Oh, okay. The first question is mainly we define what is SBOM quality and what is the key items to improve the SBOM quality. So the defining some elements should be included is depending on each guideline or regulation. And second question, I'm sorry, I forgot. Sorry.
So will this documentation fit for AI SBOM as well?
Okay. In this document, the first chapter is scope. We are only focused on the license compliance and security assurance. So currently, it doesn't include any AI matters.
I see. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, and we have another question? Two questions. Right, so you were first. Here you go. You're welcome.
Thank you very much. I have a question when it comes to SBOM and services. So just to give you a little bit of context, I work for open source consultancy, and about 90% of our work is helping clients with upstream work, like delivering patches, improving performance, these kind of things. Now, obviously, as part of the OpenChain specification, we do have a team, a working team, with a technical sponsor and all that, but in real life, I'm doing most of the work, so it lies on my shoulders. And I just wanted to check, what in your view are the minimum requirements that you need to have, and how can you optimize like an SBOM as well, like a template with the service focus? Like we don't deliver products as much. So.
Yes, from Japanese, there are so many embedded system Japanese companies. So we are now discussing such perspective. But of course, providing services companies having some same issues. And the key is, it's a little bit different situation. The embedded company often can't receive the correct information from the upstream companies because we have many complex supply chain and only provided binaries from the upstream companies. But I don't know the details, but many service companies can take source code from the upstream. It improves, it solves some situation. So in such case, we think the upstream company provide the information which can identify specific source code. So I'm not sure, but it's how to identify the actual binary or software packages is the most critical thing. And next one is when occurring some issues, we need to contact the upstream and the representative. So these information should be included is a second key point, I think.
Okay, thank you very much.
Yeah.
Maybe we could discuss this more on a higher level because SBOM would be really deep. Maybe that would be something for the next OpenChain one to discuss.
Absolutely.
Supply chain for service providers.
Supply chain for service providers. Marcel, thank you for volunteering to arrange that discussion. By the way, I saw you with Collabora. I got to say thank you for the Office online because that's really cool to have LibreOffice available on the cloud. Right, August?
I have a question for you. Do you see in the future SBOMs really being mainstream without the inclusion of code identifiers? I mean, do you realistically think that if we do not widely introduce code identifiers, we will be able to have SBOMs that can be really shared and used not just in describing the software, but in auditing the software?
I'm sorry, I don't know. Of course, SBOM provide some portion of the information, but I think it can't be solve all things because it is technically, there are many technically difficult programs existing. And of course, some companies can't provide the information accurately from the technical perspective and the political perspective. So the In chapter, I'm not sure about chapter 5.7 or somewhere, the we needed to make it clear what company or what parties are responsible for replying the details of the component. The minimum information required is who is responsible for which component. It is, at this moment, my thought.
Right, we have time for one last question, and it's Balakrishna.
Hi, thank you. This might be a little off the topic question since it was not covered here, but my question is more related towards attestation of SBOMs. We have not been seeing that anywhere in any of the topics. We have been talking about minimum elements of SBOMs. So we do know attestation of SBOMs would become mandatory when you're dealing with a lot of vendors, right? How are we going to deal with, so even here in this slide, we saw that we would be clubbing SBOMs that are coming from vendors. And when we are doing that actual merge, let's say we use the OSARDL program or the CPIA program or something else or some commercial program to merge these SBOMs, at that point of time, the vendor's attestation would be removed and your own attestations would be added. And as per all the regulations we are seeing, there's a lot of liability there in place in case something goes wrong during merging of those SBOMs, right? So are there any talks, are there any discussions about how to handle these things? Will we be appending the attestations from the vendors, or will the final supplier be the only person liable who has to give warranty for the SBOM with one single attestation? Is there a discussion on that point? I'm sorry, it was a huge question.
Sorry. Shane, can you help?
Yeah, I hope so. So you're really talking about the liability containment of the suppliers. So to track, to track who created the SBOMs, but not just I received an SBOM from a supplier, but to be able to see on the whole supply chain, this company, that company, that company, that company. So I guess it's like description fields, right? To maybe keep tracking, there we go. Intercomponent relationship. And this would give you a way to see who did what components and to basically see.
Yes.
Yeah.
And sorry. Go ahead, please.
So you guys, sorry.
I just realized we're going to have to take another couple of minutes because now we'll
Right.
have the two other questions.
I happen to spend time at the ITF working and there's a SCIT working group that started dealing with attestation frameworks for doing stuff. So the interesting question about this is, do you recursively stick things in documents that you got from other suppliers, or do you try to put something on a ledger somewhere and refer to the fact that somebody attested to it and transitively point out that they gave that to you and you're then putting it in documents? Because depending on how you want to solve this problem, you'll end up with a huge chain of recursive data, which will be a tarball of infinite size relatively quickly, or you figure out how to put things in some other meta-level structure to carry after these things. So I don't want to rat hole on that, but to answer that question and to look at this diagram, I think there are interesting questions about how you solve that problem. So I would be personally interested in, sticking my oar in as far as that's concerned.
That's a very interesting point. So the idea of consolidating the information, noting the attestation, but not just including all the documents. So to be reconfiguring SBOM into a new SBOM, saying the other SBOMs.
Yes.
Do you think
Yeah,
that implementation would work?
Sorry, I don't have any answer at
You
this
have to
moment.
come on the call and start showing slides. So Alistair just volunteered. Yes. Okay, 2 more questions. Okay, that's 4 more questions. Nathan first.
Hopefully a short question. Sorry if I missed a detail earlier, but you said you're going to become a work group. I was curious what your plans were for this group or your goals.
Study group and we needed to explain study group and working group. It will be good explained by Shane.
Right. It's interesting but simple. It's a gateway. So a study group can look at anything, but they can't action a solution. And they can look at it and say, we think this is the right direction, but then they need the approval of the board to be a work group to actually implement. So the study group has essentially already built a huge guide, but technically that's just brainstorming. But as a work group, they can now say, it's going to be a guide. And that's the nuance, because not only guides, we make ISO standards, so we have these processes now for filtering, and the gateway is important that people know when it triggers from a conversation to a work packet. Does that make sense? Alrighty. Okie dokie. Jimmy, I think, and then Sandra.
Yes. So one thing that sort of recently emerged in conversations internally is like the security of the SBOM itself. And if we can discuss sort of putting requirements on encryption of SBOM, both at rest and at transfer, and access control of SBOM. So when it's received, I know that sort of it's being access controlled, it's not leaking, it's encrypted. To preserve that is that a discussion that has emerged in the study group so far? I haven't followed too closely.
Yes, this document borrows some sentences from the telco guideline. So it's included, originally created by the telco guide. So it's same situation, same terms and the same words are used in this guide at this moment.
Okay. Well, currently the telco guide doesn't cover the encryption part, but I have a pull request. Let's see if that gets through.
Thank you.
But they're not as much fun as us.
Well, oh yeah, you've already got a few. Right, so actually Krob and I are working together, so the security baseline from OpenSSF and so on, we're referencing it. They've included OpenChain in it. This encryption thing we'll be doing, I mean, I guess I'll sit down with Krob and talk about it. So, yeah. Sandra. Poor Kubota-san is getting hundreds of questions.
That's good. It means it was interesting. So, Kubota-san, at the beginning of the presentation, you mentioned that sometimes actors are not as interested in compliance, and you might need to convince the actor to provide you with an SBOM. This is something we have also experienced. So, I wanted to ask if you have any tips how to deal with this situation, and how do you see the industry, if the industry is moving towards more compliance, or on the other hand, you think there are less?
It is a very good question, but I can't answer here because today I have an OpenChain hat, but the answer is I need to wear the company hat. So I will answer privately. Sorry.
Sounds good. Thank you.
Right. I guess, do you have one? No. Okay. In that case, huge hand for Kubota-san. Thank you.
Thank you very much.